What is up, YouTubians? Kuda Malloy here, coming at you with another exciting video, trying to give everybody another example of what my family would eat in Sicily, the Sicilian diet, to basically live to be well into their 90s, if not into their hundreds, 102, 103 years old. So in a previous video, I had mentioned that some of my relatives, like I have an aunt right now who's 92, sharp as a tack, no medical issues whatsoever. She's kicking and screaming and alive and well, and she'll probably live another 10 or 15 years. So I kind of just wanted to give more of a side story of kind of like the dinner time meal, right? And basically this soup helping to contribute to living so long, right? So you got to remember, these are people that were born in the early 1900s, right? If not late 1800s, that lived to be in their 90s and hundreds. So this soup would be something that they would have at nighttime for dinner. And the whole premise of this soup, probably they didn't even know it, but the whole premise of the soup was basically to carb load for the next day's work, to replenish the stores of energy in their body so that they would have enough energy the next day to go and work, to wake up, have their goat's milk and their coffee, or sheep's milk and their coffee, work for about 6 hours, right? Take a break and then do lunch, take a little nap, and then work for another 4 or 5 hours in the fields, taking care of the goats and the sheep and the pigs and doing the whole farm thing, and then milking all those animals, right? To get the milk and the butter and the cheese and all the good stuff. So carb loading and energy replacement, right, is what this soup was. So let's start with the basics. So I used cannellini beans in today's soup, and they're also sprouted, which means that basically, think about Sicily in the 1930s, 1940s, World War II. They were poor people. So whatever they had available is whatever they used. And they would dry a lot of things, right? Dried. They would salt cure a lot of things. There was probably no refrigeration at that time, obviously. So if they had dried beans, what they would do is they would soak them in water overnight. And what that would do is that would allow the beans to sprout. So it could be lentils, it could be cannellini, it could be kidney, speckled beans, lima beans, navy beans. Whatever they had available is what they used, right? And that sprouting process basically unlocks all the vitamins and the minerals and the nutrients. It also allows the body to digest those beans and legumes easier. And it's fiber. Fiber was good for gut health and gut bacteria, because that's what your gut health and your good gut bacteria feeds off of, is fiber. You get your body some fiber, your gut biome will be a happy thing, right? So that's the cannellini bean fiber element to the soup. If they had potatoes, they would use potatoes, lentils. You kind of get the idea. So then whatever was in season, right? So then the other element is obviously the root vegetables, right? Carrots, turnips, those kinds of things. Whatever root vegetables they had available, they would wash them, clean them, and then put them in the soup. And the soup would start out with some kind of pork belly, right? Basically, in today's terms, we would use bacon, but bacon has those harmful chemicals, nitrates, sulfides. Try to stay away from bacon. If you have to use something, try to get just pure pork belly, like uncured, unseasoned. It's probably the best thing that we would have like in modern times. Non-GMO, organic, you kind of get the idea, right? Grass-fed, whatever you can find in that realm. So they would start with that and some olive oil, put in some garlic, some onions, red onion, yellow onion. Whatever was in season is what they used, right? Whatever root vegetables, things were around, right? So carrots, there's some leek in here. And then also the herbs, right? So there's some mint in there. There's some basil in here that kind of whittled away to nothing. There's a piece of a leek, so if they had leeks, they would use those. Kind of just trying to get that trio of garlic, onions, carrots, leeks to give the base for the soup, for the sauce, for the whole thing. You kind of get the idea. If tomatoes were in season, like if it was late summer, they would use tomatoes in here, not to make a sauce, but just maybe like one tomato in there to kind of give it that kind of aroma. So it was almost never the same soup twice within the same week. Like basically every time they made the soup, they might do this 4 times a week or 3 times a week, but every time they would do this soup, it would be just a little bit different based on whatever, they felt like having or whatever. Chard, really huge, right? Leafy cruciferous vegetables, rainbow chard, Swiss chard, spinach was like another huge thing. Some people would have used like cauliflower, which is what's in here. There's a little bit of white cauliflower in here as well. There's some onion, obviously. There's some onion, shallots, whatever they kind of had. And then typically, sometimes they would have meat in here. Sometimes they would have fish in here. But more often than not, it was meat. And it was usually leftover meat from lunch. So don't believe all the hype and somebody's narrative about trying to sell you some product or whatever. Believe me, my family and a lot of people in Italy, especially, I think even the Greeks, right? All those blue zones, they were eating meat. Trust me, because think about it this way, right? These are towns that are raising sheep for milk, right? Cheese, butter, whatever. You have female sheep and then you have male sheep. You have female goats, you have male goats. You have female pigs and then you have male pigs. So if all the female species are making the milk, what are the male species doing? They're being raised for their meat, to be barbecued, to be roasted, right? Roasted chicken. You get the idea, right? If female chickens are laying eggs, male chickens are being raised to have for dinner and for lunch. So anyways, the point I'm trying to get at is that whatever meat was left over from lunch, like let's say they had a roasted chicken for lunch, whatever meat was left over, they would put into the soup. And we're talking nose to tail cooking. So they would use everything, the kidneys, the liver, especially, oh my God, chicken livers in Sicily is like a big thing. Fried chicken livers, that's like a huge thing. Or they would make like an organ meat stew out of it. But you kind of get the idea. So let's say they had roasted a goat for lunch, right? They would use the leftovers and throw them into this kind of soup. So in this case, there's chicken in here, but on another night of the week, they might have used roasted goat or roasted sheep or baked or, barbecued, whatever they could find. And it's kind of funny because in another video, I kind of mentioned it, but the vegetables, sometimes they would also roast over a hot fire as well. Like not really barbecue them, but you kind of get the idea, to get the charring. And that charring bits, so those little bits that went into the soup, was kind of like our version currently of activated charcoal, right? So they were using what they had available at that time, probably unknowingly, unwillingly, added some charred whatever it was into their soups and into their meals. And that charred whatever it was material was basically helping to filter out the toxins, binding to whatever was a free radical in their system and getting that out of their system, right? So then one of the last kind of elements that was, there's obviously olive oil in here, but one of the last kind of elements was whatever leftover cheese they had. Like if they had like a softer sheep's milk cheese, they would throw that into the soup sometimes. That's why this one has a little bit of a creamy texture, right? We would call it today like either yogurt or sour cream or whatever. But sometimes it was just little chunks of little cheese, thrown in there, like whatever they had, and they would put that in there. So it's fat, it's protein, it's carbs, it's complex carbs, basically refueling their muscles in their body for the next day's work. So there you go. There's an example of the typical Sicilian soup that they would have at nighttime, right? This is always at nighttime, somewhere around 8 o'clock at night. Because the typical day for them was wake up around 5, 6 in the morning, have a cup of sheep's milk or goat's milk with maybe a cup of coffee, maybe a little small piece of bread, and then work in the fields for 6 hours, right? Tend to the sheep and the goats and the pigs and whatever it was. Have lunch, have a nice big lunch. Lunch was the biggest meal of the day. They would take a nap for about an hour or two, and then they would have dinner. There was always some kind of bread there too going on, which was a fermented bread, right? A bread that took 48 hours, 72 hours to make. They would have a piece of bread with some cheese and maybe the soup, and then have a little salad. And then maybe occasionally, if they could get a piece of fruit, they would have that after the dinner. Some days yes, some days no. You get the idea. But there you go, guys. There's the Sicilian soup. There's links in the description to some cool products if you want to check those out. Down there in the description, there's also a link to Cooter Malloy's product reviews on Facebook. Make sure you check that page out. There's a huge subscribe button and a huge notification bell and also a like button. Make sure you hit all three of those. I'm really trying to hit 500 subscribers by the end of this month, so let's make that happen. Tell your friends, share this video, post it on Twitter, get the links, do what you got to do, but really make sure everybody hits that subscribe button. I'm Cooter Malloy, and I will catch you all. Hopefully, we all live to be 100 plus on the next video.